Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, Chris and Jason here. Thanks for checking out the show. We appreciate it. We're going to go into a cool default story for today that we just exited at the end of last week. Real quick, we are doing a 3-lender virtual training. It's full 2-day boot camp followed by 12 months of follow-up and implementation. We're doing that on April 23rd and 24th. We have one spot left to apply. Go to hardmoneymastermind.com and click consulting. hardmoneymastermind.com consulting. Okay. All right. So default situation. We have a lot of these stories, and I think they're beneficial for all the lenders listening because for a few reasons. One, it's important to know what you're getting into, also how to handle it, and if you play your cards right, these should be profitable, as this one was. So we're going to dive into this one. You want me to start with some of the basic deal structure?
Yeah, I was just going to say that like defaults never work out exactly as you would think. And defaults can be scary a little bit, right? Even if you're in a really, really good collateral position, because they're just unknown of what could happen. And we were talking about the reason this topic came up is we were actually going to talk about a different default, but we didn't want to jinx it because it hasn't fully paid off yet. So we're going to talk about one that just did pay off last week as well. And a lot of these have a lot of good equity in them, but like some of these things last a long time, like 3 years. And those aren't just in states that have long foreclosure periods. Some of these are shorter foreclosure period timelines, but things happen with bankruptcies and contested foreclosures, and another bankruptcy, right? They'll do like things happen. And, you know, if somebody doesn't want to lose their property, they can tie up the process for a long period of time. And there's a lot of things that go into that, right? Like your investor is not getting interest, right? So then there's regular interest and there's default interest. Maybe taxes are due. You're paying their taxes and you're paying their insurance and you're stepping in and you're just putting more capital into these things. So it gets it to a comfortable situation, uncomfortable situation. And this could be even if you have a super, super, super low LTV. If you don't have a super low LTV and this stuff happens, it can get scary. So this particular one that Chris is going to start off with did work out. And, you know, we got a good payoff here late last week, but a lot of it was because the loan amount was very low compared to what it sold for.
All right, here's what happened on this one. So first of all, this one was sourced by Ian Walsh, our business partner in Philly, but the property is in Maryland. It's in Greenbelt, Maryland, down the street from College Park, right near University of Maryland. We're recording this the week of March Madness, so go Terps basketball. It's right in that area. I also used to work in Greenbelt, so we know the area pretty well. It just so happened that the borrower, the guarantor, lives in Jason's neighborhood pretty much. And okay, so it's a local deal, long story short. And the property is an office condo. It's 2 units in a complex of office condos, so it's very easy to value. There's many of these things over there. And they're probably worth, you know, high 2s. Our valuation we did with LCS, since it was commercial, came in at low 300s, but we're doing a loan of $75,000. So whatever it's worth 250, it's worth 300. We'll show you how that played out, but whatever it is, we're at a very, very good equity position. The property is owned by a business entity like normal. And I don't know if there's 1 or 2 owners. We ended up having 2 signers. But they came to us, they wanted a loan for $75,000 for investment purposes. They wrote this on our term sheet, discretionary funds, investment funds, etc., something like that, right? A little bit vague.
Yeah, they own some other real estate, and they own some. You know, they were obviously in. You know, looking back, I don't know how sophisticated of a real estate investor operator they were, but like they certainly were in the commercial real estate space. They own commercial properties. They owned investment properties. Again, anytime we do a cash out refinance, we do a use of proceeds form, even if it's on a true commercial asset. This is a true commercial asset. This is an office condo that was rented out to 2 separate tenants because it was 2 units. But we want to without actually taking the cash out proceeds and sending it to them directly, right? Because it goes to the title company, just describe where the money is going towards. And they said it was for obviously investment purposes. And I was going to talk a little bit about professional office in general, but let's get to that. Well, it was lower end professional office building, and there are some risks that go along with that. But let's keep pushing this along, and I can get back to that.
Okay. All right. So we papered it just like we said. We ended up having a second guarantor. The initial person who applied for the loan and I believe owns the property, or excuse me, owns the business entity that owns the property, had low credit. So we're like, can you have anyone else sign with you? He did, a business partner, somebody like that. So we had two guarantors, one in the 700s, one in the 500s. And that funded in May of 23. I was looking at some dates while we were doing this.
Yeah. It's almost 2 years ago.
Okay. About 2 years ago. And the loan was performing for 6 or 7 months. We didn't hear from them. They got their cash out. We sent them up on ACH. Automatic payments were coming in monthly. And here's what happened. This is unusual. Loan is performing. And out of the blue, we get a bankruptcy filing from this business entity, a Chapter 11. And I'm like, that's weird. Normally, as a lender, a real estate lender, normally the only time we see bankruptcies is when somebody's intentionally using it to stop a foreclosure. You still there? Okay, we're good. I just want to make sure my video didn't freeze up again. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. So out of the blue, we get a Chapter 11 filing, and I send it over to our local attorney who handles all of our foreclosure and bankruptcy stuff in DC Metro. And he looked it up, and it turns out that this guy was getting sued by people who had invested with him. And I think he was also about to get charges filed by the state for securities fraud. Apparently, he was using one of his business entities to raise money from investors, might have been like Ponzi style sort of thing, raise money from investors in his local community. I think he might have been involved in a religious organization or something like that. And people were investing money with him for some kind of stated business purpose. I don't know all the details. They weren't going to just tell us all the case. And okay, so that was going on. He's getting sued by people who had invested with him and potentially lost money or disappeared, or they just didn't know. He's having some kind of charges filed against him, probably criminal, by the state securities agency. And so to get the creditors to stop beating down his door, he filed a Chapter 11. I'm like, oh, like this is a new one. Like we've seen every kind of default that you can imagine. And the stories are wild, but they're interesting. So this stays kind of where it is for a while. That happened 6 months after funding. It was around November of 23. So about 18 months ago. And I was like, shoot, how long is this going to take to work out? We got a bankruptcy. We got criminal charges. Like, I don't know what this guy owns, how the court's going to handle it, but this could take a while. So Jason and I discussed it. And I don't recall exactly who this investor was initially for $75,000, but we bought them out. They had already been paid 6 months of interest. They were performing. The loan is performing. And we bought out that note because we were like, this one could be in default for a while. Who can predict how that's going to play out, right? That's what happened first.
Yeah. And again, like, so I'm guessing in November, there's no more payments, right? It stopped at that point.
That's right. After that bankruptcy was filed, they stopped making payments.
Yeah. So then it's kind of a wait and see game. And again, it was, okay, well, you stop making payments. We're going to go and pursue foreclosure, right? Because you're not in good standing anymore.
Well, we couldn't even start foreclosure because they were already in bankruptcy. Usually it's the other way around.
True. Yeah. So
okay. Here's what happened from there. It was late 23. Our attorney enters his appearance in the bankruptcy case and just tries to ask what's going on, right? And so we get limited information because it's not like the state prosecutors are going to be like, oh, here's my case file, because we're not involved in it, right? Like we're not involved in whatever was going on with that securities fraud. We are involved in the bankruptcy because we're a creditor. He owes us money. And so honestly, like we hear very little for the next like year and change. Bankruptcy court is slow. There's things that happen, but then like, hearings that happen, but then there's no real news that comes out of them. We'll just talk about it again in another 2 or 3 months kind of thing. Bankruptcy court's slow and annoying. Anyway, so fast forward about a year after the time of default, maybe more. It was right around the beginning of this year, beginning of 25. I don't know what's going on with the criminal case. We have a little bit of information about the bankruptcy case, but not a lot. And the bankruptcy trustee, the Chapter 11 trustee, files a motion to sell this property so they can pay back some of the people who lost money in the investment scheme. And we're like, great. That's great news. The trustee is going to force an auction sale. We haven't even started foreclosure. We haven't been able to. We're just tied up in bankruptcy for a year plus, maybe like, 14, 15 months at this point. So they do. They check with us. I don't know if they had to, but they checked with us as a lien holder, and they're like, where should we open bid? Kind of like a foreclosure auction, even though this one is voluntary, or I guess forced by the trustee, whatever. We had a $75,000 loan. I looked at our payoff, and we looked at the value of the property, and our payoff is probably getting up towards $115,000 at the time from 75. Default interest, late fees, legal fees, all that. Whatever you could tack on, we tacked on. In talking to them, we decided that they're going to open bid as, I think it was $140,000, which is low for this property. It's probably half the value of the property. The auction gets action. There's 2 cash buyers. I was not there. It probably would have been a good one to go to, but you never know what's going to happen there. You might just be wasting half a day to go to an auction. It doesn't happen. So anyway, apparently this was a good one with 2 cash buyers going 5,000 by 5,000 all the way up the ladder from 140,000 to 220 something. And one of them ends up winning it by $1,000. These are obviously qualified people. They're paying in cash. They're not financing. And of course, the bankruptcy court, once it's done, the trustee wants these people paid and what have you. So cool. Wow. It went just like that. Like first we hear about they're going to hold an auction. A few weeks later, there's an auction. And then a few weeks after that, they're like, all right, we're about ready to close. Let's start talking about the payoff. And so we issued a payoff with all that stuff, including that 10% late fee you might have heard us mention before. So in a case like this, this guy's done some bad stuff. This is not like a borrower who just went a little sideways who we're going to lend to again. Like this guy's accused of financial frauds. So we tacked on the fees that we could, according to the note, including a 10% late fee based on the principal amount, not the monthly payment lates, but over the maturity date, 10% late fee, which is $7,500 in this case. And that's the only thing that the bankruptcy trustee beat us up on. He said to our attorney, like, can HMV go a little light on the late fees and stuff? And we were immediately like, you know what? Sure. We're getting a fine payoff. We're happy to be easy to work with, flexible, what have you. We'll knock that down from $7,500 to $5,000. And that's how it paid off a few days ago on Friday. We're recording this on a Monday. It's paid off on Friday. So we had a good exit. We had our lender accounts. Jason and mine own the note. We had about 16 months of default interest go to our own lender accounts. Late fees went to the company. The other late fee, the 10% thing, attorneys got paid in full. And it was a good result for a weird deal, right?
Yeah. And a few takeaways as you're kind of thinking through this, because you can be like, well, how, a question might be like, how would have you controlled this in the past, in the future? Like, how would I look out for this? And a lot of deals, you can't predict what's going to happen. Yeah. Maybe you can go a little bit more detailed in background checks and things like that. To see if there was any case filed against the guy in the past before this happened. And, typically we're pretty diligent about Googling people. Sometimes we do background checks and things like that. But in general, like we just have a knack for being conservative on things. And one of the things I was going to bring up earlier is like, this was kind of a lower end professional office. And those are hard deals to finance to begin with, because banks don't really want to mess with them. They have short-term tenant leases. So banks don't want to mess with deals that only have like a commercial deal that only has a 1-year lease. They're at a small price point. I can't believe someone bid $200,000+ to buy it, to be honest. But also cash out refinances are more risk, right? Because you don't fully control where the capital is. If it's a purchase, a fix and flip on a residential house, you know that they're going to use the money, fix up the house, sell it, and hopefully be reasonable with their offer, and and how much they're going to sell it for. On refinances of investment residential or commercial, like it doesn't fully work out like that, right? Because you can't fully control where the capital is, and you're just injecting, in this case, if we did a loan of 75 grand, minus fees and stuff and prepaid interest, like injecting $60,000 into this guy's bank account to do whatever, whatever. I mean, we control what we can, but so there's just more risk kind of in that. So just, you got to be conservative because you just don't fully know what their game plan is. And then you got to make a business decision if it's worth happening. So like, there's that side of it. And there's also like, hey, listen, I know on paper how long it takes to foreclose in most states. And keep in mind, this is a true commercial property. Like this is a true commercial foreclosure because it's a commercial asset. Like that's even quicker in the state of Maryland. But like Chris said, we couldn't even foreclose on the property or start a foreclosure process because we had an open bankruptcy filing. So stuff happens. And, it's weird to think about some of the deals that have defaulted with us over the years. And a lot of them were deals that you would never expect to default because it happened for one crazy reason or the next. And again, this deal worked out in our benefit. It was fine. But like, it could have been a lot worse, right? It could have been dragged out for a longer period of time. We could have potentially had to take back the property and then deal with the tenants. It worked out because we had a lot of equity in the property, right? There was a lot of equity in property. We did a good loan amount on the front end. So listen, we talk about the 4 C's all the time. Collateral, obviously, by far being the most important, and character being the second most important. And this guy didn't have good character traits. So, we either, we dropped the ball, we didn't catch it, whatever the case is, that worked out. But a lot of the time, the character is so important because then they make the right decisions. And this particular deal, the court held this guy's hand to make the decision on his behalf, which actually helped us. And we've always said, whenever there's other counsel or other parties involved during a default, it's a good thing because then instead of us talking to an irrational, bad character borrower that potentially slip through, we're dealing with a sensible party that might be more professional than them and also doesn't have an emotional involvement in the asset. So it's actually a good thing during foreclosures or during defaults if there's an attorney involved, because then they can help them make a rational decision of what to work. So that actually worked in our in our favor in this one.
For sure it did. So that one we got out clean, we got out profitable. Hopefully your default exits are similar. If somebody does go sideways, it should be an opportunity to make a bonus, not to have your principal in danger. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. As always, you can find us on YouTube or any podcast platform where we put out all of our episodes. And until the next one, we'll see everyone inside hardmoneymastermind.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.